Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're coming from. My name is Justin Sanders, and I hold the Kappy and Eric M Flanders Chair of Palliative Care. In addition to knowing Bal since my arrival here in Montreal 4 years ago to take on the role that he founded, my team had the pleasure of caring for him in the unit that bears his name in the last weeks of his life at the Royal Victoria Hospital. There is an idea behind the Southern African philosophy of Ubuntu that says, I am because we are, and it emphasizes our shared humanity and the interconnectedness of all people. This is an idea that also represents much of what many of us took from Bal's teaching and writing. And as we gather today, I feel that we might also say that we are because of him. We are certainly here today to celebrate him. We had an enormous response to our call for tributes. Over 50 stories from around the world. Many people wanted the opportunity to express the impact of Bal on their careers and the building of palliative care here and in other countries. That is why we're here today. I'm grateful for the partnership of the Canadian Society for Palliative Medicine for their partnership in realizing this memorial. Because the next 90 minutes will move very quickly and many people may have to drop off, I want to recognize Devin Phillips and Lexa Frail from McGill and Leah Salvage, Executive Director of the Canadian Society for Palliative Medicine, for their extraordinary work in collecting and assembling the many tributes from friends and colleagues, as well as McGill IT Services for helping make this possible. So thank you. After this event, we invite you to go to the platform to see the many and varied tributes to Bal. They comprise an incredible collection of tributes and memories. And now I'd like to introduce John Scott, one of the first physicians to work with Bal in palliative care at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal, and the current president of the Canadian Society of Palliative Medicine, which Dr. Mount founded.
Hello. Thank you, Justin. I'm very pleased that the Canadian Society of Palliative Medicine could team up with Palliative Care McGill on this. I first met Bal in early 1975. I had shaken hands with him a year earlier, but we never spoke. However, I had heard a lot about this charismatic surgeon from my mentor and friend Ina Cummings, who was the first doctor that Bal recruited to join him on this adventure. I had heard a great deal about this persuasive, charming, passionate man who had a vision to transform the care of patients with terminal illness. I was told about him generating infectious enthusiasm, apparently changing the minds of medical chiefs and hospital presidents and ministers of health. So intimidating, intriguing. Shortly after the first patients were admitted to the new palliative care unit in late January 1975, Bal telephoned me to inquire if I was open to being recruited as a physician to join him and to join Ina. I gave him a clear no, but in the end agreed to a tour of the unit out of my intense curiosity to find out firsthand what Ina was all doing. I arrived at his office on the appointed day with strong defenses against this persuasive guy that I was warned could sell coal to Newcastle. The first problem was his secretary was not expecting me. Bal had forgotten about the invite, a tendency I came to realize was not infrequent in this academic star who was juggling so many balls in the air. She goes to Bal's office and he bursts out of the door, John, wonderful, great, I'm so glad to see you. Come right in, and close the door. Well, I'm actually late for a cystoscopy. So why don't you come with me? Here, put these on. And he literally throws a pair of scrubs at me. And with gusto and hand gestures, he begins to describe his vision of palliative care, while the two of us undress face to face. I call this story the stripping of my defenses. From the beginning of our relationship, there was a surprising level of intimacy. The day continued in like manner, with new people, a lot of emotion, ideas. I met an inspiring team of professionals, including Sue, who you'll be hearing for in a minute, witnessed several remarkable conversations with patients about both pain and meaning. Val projected his slides of St. Christopher's in a tiny little office. So it was only a foot square on the wall. And he told his stories with the enthusiasm as if he was talking to a lecture hall of 300. By the end of the day, my head and my heart were spinning. In my head, I was still putting up resistance since I feared that I was being caught up with the charisma of this man. But in my deepest self, I knew that my life's direction had changed. This was what I was meant to do, called to do, yearned to do. Bal stripped my defenses so that I could listen to my heart, and I will be forever grateful. So we're now going to hear some 4 video clips from some other colleagues.
I'm Catherine Mannix. I'm a retired British palliative care physician, and I work now to promote better public understanding of dying. I first met Balfour Mount in 1988 when I was a very, very junior trainee in palliative medicine, working in the UK and with the good fortune to have 4 weeks to travel in Canada, during which my scholarship sponsors insisted that I spent time at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Balfour Mount's unit. I didn't know then what a formative experience that was going to be, both to see a multidisciplinary inpatient unit flourishing in a hospital environment, but to meet somebody so driven and passionate, yet courteous and charming, who didn't let my junior status get in the way, but actually went out of his way to look out for opportunities to further my interests and to make my interests become something that would grow within me. I had an interest in the psychology of symptom management, and he arranged for me, for example, to spend an hour with the incredible Professor Ron Melzack, which was amazing for me as such a junior person. But to Bal, that was a thing to do, to take the spark inside a person and fan it into a flame of enthusiasm that for me has burned for the rest of my career. It transformed the way I undertook my training. It made me take additional training as a cognitive behavioral psychotherapist. And I felt always that there was somebody with their hand on my back over the ocean. He's been a great influence on us all. He'll be sadly missed, but his legacy is enormous, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful to him.
I work very closely with Val on a daily basis and on many projects, from fundraising to establishing a palliative care unit at the Jewish General Hospital and the International Congress, to name a few. I attended many initial meetings with Val, and my responsibility was to follow up with issues that arose during the meetings. I remember attending a meeting with Val with the senior administration of the Vic, and we were once again looking for funding. When Val realized that we were not receiving the positive response that he had hoped for, his tone and tenor changed. I quickly realized that his approach was definitely not working, so I kicked Val under the table. The look on his face changed quickly. He looked a little startled. He did change his approach with our colleagues, but I sat there wondering if my services might no longer be needed. Walking back to our offices after the meeting, Val thanked me for my discreet reminder about his behavior. In the past few weeks since Val's death, I've had the opportunity to reconnect with old colleagues. I am reminded of the incredible teams that Val hired, supported, encouraged, and valued. Val was a pioneer, for sure, in palliative medicine, but he also was a pioneer in establishing effective multidisciplinary teams who deal with complex patients and families. And many of these professionals became experts in the field of palliative care. Thank you, Val.
Hi, My name is Susan Block, and I founded the Department of Psychosocial Oncology and Palliative Care, now the Department of Supportive Oncology at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and the Brigham, and co-founded the Harvard Medical School Center for Palliative Care, a national center of excellence in palliative care. I first met Bal in the early 80s in Montreal at his famous, at that point, conference for people who had any interest in palliative care. I was there with my husband, Andy Billings, who was also a pioneer in the field of palliative care. I think the conference kind of blew me away because of the diversity of voices and perspectives and the sort of passion and engagement of the participants in general, but Bal in particular. That came at a time when I was sort of questioning my engagement with the field of hospice and palliative care. I was a hospice medical director, and it was feeling difficult to both be committed to hospice and committed to an academic career at that point. And Bal kind of showed me the way. He was in lots of ways an exemplar and a role model, showing how you could kind of passionately hold to the values of hospice and also think critically and scientifically about science and medicine, and be committed to, being in the belly of the academic beast. And that was a tension that was really, I was struggling with a lot. One of the things that I admired the most about Bal was his deep, deep sense of morality. And that was both inspiring and challenging. I wanted to be approved of by Bal. And I remember how painful it was for Andy and me to disagree with him about aid in dying, because we both had such deep respect for his values. It was really striking to me. At a personal level, Bal was incredibly supportive of me and of Andy as we worked to develop educational programs, research programs, and clinical programs in the United States.
In this whole memorial for Bal, there's been a recognition that the first part of his legacy has been very powerful and very much supported. That's the palliative care part. The second part of his legacy, though, which I think is even bigger and more important in some ways, not to compare, but is that to bring the lessons of palliative care to the rest of medicine. That's whole person care. Because healing is a crucial part of medicine at all phases, not just when people are towards the end of their lives. And it's relevant for surgical patients, for medical patients, for oncology patients, you name it. We began to implement part of that legacy with McGill programs and whole person care and the teaching of medical students. But it still needs to be, and we extended it to some extent to faculty. It needs to be much more widespread, much better supported, and much more part of the curriculum, not just for medical students, but for residents, for faculty development, and for how we see the whole kind of strategic future of medicine. Because I think what Bal and Michael Carney, to some extent, clarified was that medicine has two parts. It has a whole curing, fixing part, at which we, in some ways, in many ways, have gotten better and better. That's the thing that cures your cancer or treats your infection with an antibiotic. At the same time, there's a human response to illness that can lead to a greater sense of integrity and wholeness. That's the healing part. And that healing part needs to be an integral part of what we do. It's important for education. It's important, absolutely important for our patients. And the fact that often it isn't paid enough attention to is one of the reasons patients can remain very unhappy even though the curing side of medicine is good. It's important for us as physicians because that in many ways is where the great satisfaction of medicine is. Relating to people as human beings, they heal, and in response we heal, as Bal would say, at the same time.
I love seeing the reactions that people have in the chat, which we will keep and add to the memorial. So one of the things we're going to do today is to read some of the many tributes that came in from friends old and new for Bal. And so I'm going to start by reading a reflection from Michael Thane, a retired physician and former medical director in palliative care in Red Deer, Alberta. In the 1970s, as a young family physician with an interest in the new field of palliative care that I had just heard about, I attended an international family medicine conference in Toronto. One of the keynote speakers was listed as Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. There was a large auditorium filled with family physicians waiting for her to speak. The moderator came on stage and announced that due to a family issue, Dr. Kubler-Ross was unable to attend, but they had Dr. Balfour Mount to speak in her place. I would estimate that at least 2/3 of the physicians in attendance got up and walked out. Those of us who stayed were treated to an incredible talk about his visit to St. Christopher's Hospice and about what he was doing in his newly established palliative care unit at the Royal Vic. I was spellbound and have to say this experience changed the course of my career. I returned to my home in Red Deer, Alberta, and with some like-minded nurses, we established a small palliative care unit in our hospital. When we moved later into a new hospital, this unit was expanded. I continued my family practice, but with an increased interest in palliative care. I attended all the meetings I could, including the International Congress on Palliative Care that Dr. Mount organized on a regular basis in Montreal. This conference, while having a medical focus, also featured all the other disciplines that make up a proper palliative care team. It was always extremely informative, as were the many articles he wrote for the many different medical journals. Before my retirement, I went from palliative care being part of my regular practice to being the full-time focus of what I did. I credit Dr. Mount with guiding me into a very fulfilling practice. I will always remember him. And from Professor Irene Higginson from the Cicely Saunders Institute at King's College London, Bal was a visionary whose work in humanity have shaped palliative care across the world and whose personal kindness influenced my own path. Long before I entered the field, Bal helped define what palliative care could be. One seminal study, Living with the Dying, use of the technique of participant observation, offered groundbreaking insight into the lived experience of dying patients on a general ward compared with a dedicated palliative care unit. Their finding found with clarity and compassion what specialized palliative environments offer. It remains a foundational piece of scholarship. Bal was warm, encouraging, cheerful, and generous with his time to me and others early in our palliative care careers. His support helped shape my thinking and reinforced the principle that research must always honor the lived experience of the people we serve. At conferences, his presence was marked by humility and clarity. He brought people together, reminding us that palliative care is at its heart a human endeavor. I hope that Bal's legacy will live on through the countless clinicians, researchers, and carers he inspired, and those they in turn have inspired. I remain deeply grateful for his guidance and his example.
So in late 1974, this is in good follow-up to Dr. Higginson's comments about the evaluation studies. Against all odds, in 1974, the Royal Victoria Hospital and the Quebec government agreed to fund a 2-year pilot project at a time of inflation and difficulties. Our team was charged with designing an evaluation to prove the worth of this model of care and report back by late 1976. The pressure was enormous. How are we going to prove this? The odds of success very poor. In many ways, our survival was far from inevitable. And the key decision makers we realized we had to convince were, one, hard-nosed academic docs like Bal himself, who were always competing for money, space, attention, and many of them were quite antagonistic to our project. Secondly, hospital administrators who were facing deficits and cuts. At that time of the 70s, there was a huge problem of inflation. And thirdly, the government bureaucrats and politicians in the midst of cultural and political upheaval, which would end in the election of René Lévesque in 1976. And there was no funding, extra funding for this evaluation. In the end, Bal pulled it off, but I really don't know how he did. During all that time, he was a full-time surgeon, full academic responsibilities, his own basic science lab. A multi-pronged evaluation was mounted with Bal making sure that it included multiple patient case studies. He wanted the patient story to dominate the pilot study. And of course, it's very important to remember at this point that palliative care was founded by a patient, one who knows suffering, one who experiences passion. Our origin story of our discipline actually starts in 1963 when Bal was diagnosed with testicular cancer and given a poor prognosis of survival. He received grueling treatment and then faced years of waiting for potential recurrence. Throughout the rest of his life, he had many lived experiences as a recipient of care. In 1976, to ensure that that patient experience of palliative care was evaluated, Bal helped shape that study that was mentioned by Dr. Higginson, a bold anthropology experiment of participant observation that was conducted by Robert Buckingham. And we actually have a video clip by Dr. Buckingham about that. Let's listen to it.
That study that I did, Project Marmalade, was a study that had some funny beginnings. At the time, I was director of research at the first hospice in Connecticut. And Balfour Mount came down to talk to me about how do you evaluate the hospice program they have there, or the palliative care program they have there. And so I said, the only way to do it is do it in like I'm doing it in New Haven. It's a 3-year study looking at symptoms of patients and comparing them to non-hospice patients, hospice patients versus non-hospice patients. I was looking at primary site, of cancer of the breast, cancer of the colon, cancer of the lung, control study, measuring levels of pain, anxiety, depression through the MMPI. It was a 3-year study. And Bal said, I haven't got time for that. He says, why don't you come up and we'll talk? And so I went up to Montreal and I stayed in Bal's home. I stayed in the basement of his home, and we decided to go out for dinner. So we went to a place called Spaghetti House in Old Montreal, and we had a nice pasta dinner. Of course, he and I both like martinis, and so we started to drink martinis. I think we had maybe 2, maybe 3. And Bal basically said to me, hey, Buck, why don't you do a study up here? I said, well, it'll take 3 years. And he goes, I haven't got 3 years to do the study. I said, then what you should do is, use the technique of participant observation by having one of your patients talk about what they're going through and recording what's happening in their life. And he goes, well, my patients are too sick for that. Plus he goes, you're a medical anthropologist. Why don't you do this? And I said, well, I've got a job, full-time job. I'm finishing my PhD at Yale. And but golly, I just haven't got the time. He says, oh, you can make the time. And I said, Brittany said no. But then he said, let's have another martini. And to make a long story short, I said yes. And he said, well, you got to get ready for the study. So you got to lose about 30 pounds. And we have to make sure you get marks have incision made in your in your neck. So I had one of my friends, a surgeon, make the decision. Losing 30 pounds was easy. It took me a couple of months. And then I came up to Royal Vic and I admitted myself as basically a pseudo patient. And I spent time through the emergency room, then the surgical ward, then the palliative care ward. And for 2 weeks, or I think it was 10 days altogether, I recorded everything that happened to me. At night, I would put the sheets over my head and I would just write notes, but I would record everything. And so the story was I was a spy inside the House of Medicine. But to look at the different ways, different units at Royal Vic would treat terminal cancer patients, because I was indeed a pseudo patient. I did not have cancer. My primary diagnosis was to be cancer of the pancreas, which is pretty drastic. It's pretty much of a terminal disease. Though things have changed now, we have more treatment modalities that we did not have back in 1976. So I did the study. I went back, Bal and I and a few other people, the head of Royal Vic, we wrote a paper, it was published in CMAJ, Canadian Medical Association Journal, and a couple of articles were published on the study. Got a lot of headlines, got a lot of international press. Washington Post did a big article on it. New York Times did a big article on it. It was something that caused a lot of consternation. It got me in some trouble at Yale because I was a fraud and almost got kicked out of Yale, the PhD program. But then the dean relented. He called me in and says, no, it's I know what you're trying to do was trying to help. And I said, that's all I was trying to do is help Al, evaluate. Well, it got a lot of sensation, even in Canada. Maclean magazine did an article on it, Toronto Star, Montreal Star, Toronto Globe and Mail, I think it's called. I can't remember it. And so one thing led to another, and I think it helped in Canada because a lot of people say that was really the start after the study of palliative care. So that's the story. I still get asked to speak about it in my speaking engagements, usually medical schools. So that's it's still an interesting story. You probably can't do it today, and but I think it helped. I hope it helped.
Thank you, Robert, for sharing this extraordinary moment in the history of palliative care. I often have the pleasure of introducing Sue Britton to visitors here as the first palliative care nurse. And what I've come to understand is how critical she was in helping Bal realize his vision. And she's a reminder that behind every great physician is an extraordinary nurse. So I'll pass it over to Sue.
Well, some of the things that I want to talk about are, first of all, we had a lot of training through St. Christopher's, but Dr. Mount really was very impressed with Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she came to visit. Actually, it was a month later than when we first opened on January the 21st in 1975. And I remember her telling a story of a patient that she was following at home. And she was very, very demanded of her approach and her stories. So she told this lady that she was following at home that she was going out on a speaking tour and she may not be there when Elizabeth returned from her speaking tour. And when she got back from that speaking tour, she was standing at her window in Chicago. And the window that looked out on her garden, the part that faced her garden was a magnolia tree, and it was in full bloom in November. And she said that was Gertrude. I remember when she told that story, how impressed I was. And having that story told to me, I was able to bring up that subject with certain patients along the way. The other thing that I think that Bal did, and I think it came from St. Christopher's, where there was a universal prayer done after a person died. And everybody that was present working that day, the family members, the patient, we stood around the bed and we said that prayer together. I found that to be very helpful. And 2 decades after I had worked with Bal, there was a little book on my desk one day, and it had The Quiet Mind, the sayings of the White Eagle. And inside, he had this message to me. It was written at Christmas in 1995 for Sue, in celebrating of 2 decades of shared growth, and with profound gratitude for the dynamic presence, the model of compassionate care, wonderful humor, and healing you have brought into the lives of your colleagues and our colleagues' teachers, and most particularly into my life. Forever grateful, Bal. But now we're 5 decades later, and this is for Bal. In celebration of 5 decades of shared growth, and with profound gratitude for the dynamic, dynamic presence, the model of compassionate care, wonderful humor, healing that you have brought into the lives of your colleagues and our teachers, our clients, and most particularly into my life. Forever grateful, Sue.
Got a package full of wishes, a time machine, a magic wand, a globe made out of gold. No instructions or commandments, laws of gravity or indecisions to uphold. Printed on the box I see, Acme's build a world to be. Take a chance, grab a piece, help me to believe it. What kind of world do you want? Think anything. Let's start at the start, build a masterpiece. Be careful what you wish for. History starts now. Should there be people or peoples? Money, funny pedestals for fools who never pay. Raise your army, choose your steeple.
Wow. I hadn't seen those photographs, so that's very moving for me. There are a lot of tributes that I hope you will look at on the platform. We were going to take some excerpts from some of them. Deborah Dudgeon, who herself, like Dame Cicely, was a nurse and then became a medical oncologist and then a palliative care physician in Winnipeg, and then was head of palliative medicine in Queens. She writes, he emphasized the importance of holistic care and value of each person. He helped identify and establish the structures necessary to deliver this care. Interdisciplinary teams, acute and home settings, specialized knowledge and discipline recognition, and care that is based on solid scientific evidence. And perhaps his greatest gift was his complete engagement and support of the person in front of him. I would agree with many commenters about that ability to focus on the person in front of him, and you're the only person in the world. That was the experience most of us had. Dr. Harvey Max Chochinoff, a distinguished professor in psychiatry and palliative medicine at the University of Manitoba, those of us who have followed the professional pathway he forged are heirs to his legacy. He made the world a better place. I also want to make a comment. I've never seen Bob Buckingham for 49 years until I saw that video. And it brought back all kinds of memories, including all kinds of crazy things that anyone close to Bal would get involved in. Like my life was boring in comparison. Bal was always making it exciting. So New Haven, 1976, before Marmalade, we were in his home, Bob Buckingham's home, talking into the middle of the night with Kubler-Ross. Elizabeth was there, Bal was there. It was too late to go back to the hotel, so we all slept together on the floor of Bob Buckingham's home. And before dawn, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross woke us up, took us out onto the park beside the house. We had to sit in a circle, hold hands for the first rays of dawn to hit. I mean, this was the 70s. We were all a little... Martinis is far more sophisticated than some. So we will... I'm now going to introduce Robin Cohen, who I think will explain her own credentials for being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, and to the organizers for inviting me. For those of you who don't know me, I did research in palliative care alongside Bal. The initial days after I met Bal demonstrated so much of what he was in so many ways. His dedication to research and to palliative care, as well as his ability to move mountains, quickly became clear. First of all, just how I came to do this and have a position upon the recommendation of my doctoral supervisor, Ron Melzak. Bal took a chance on me. I had zero experience working with people, never mind, patients. My background was in basic science. And I'd been off for 4 years to raise my family, which at the time I was told was a choice that meant no one would ever take me seriously as a scientist afterward. But Bal got the recommendation from Ron, and the two of us met. And it was there that I learned that there actually wasn't a position yet, but he said he would create one. So that was another lesson. When he was determined, he cobbled together money from here and there, and I learned that not much can stand in his way when he wanted to get something done. He also then proceeded to organize the perfect way for me to learn about palliative care. First, he asked me to volunteer on the palliative care unit. So I was going into patients' rooms, helping them with what they need, talking to them. I learned so much from them, never having seen a patient of any sort before. And then I had so many conversations with him. My office was next to his, and I'd do some reading and have the chance to talk to him. Sometimes he would do some reading about an article and just ask me about the science of it. He was always, always available. His door was always open. He also invited me in to meet with the many of the leaders who came through to visit on the Royal Victoria Hospital Palliative Care Unit. So, like, what an amazing learning experience for me. And then he had me attend the weekly clinical rounds and also the interdisciplinary team rounds, which were, again, amazing learning experiences. And he just had the foresight to realize what I would need quick, because I wanted to be starting to do research. And also, when I was at those rounds, he would often ask me a question or somehow bring me into the conversation, which showed the team that he was serious about research and that it could provide valuable input to clinical care. Without Val's support and the understanding of the whole person care that was provided by the RVH Palliative Care Unit, I couldn't have gone on to do the research and teaching that I did. Which involved studying quality of life and providing tools for others to do so, and also conducting studies that further elucidated the central role of existential well-being to quality of life. I owe so much to Val, and I do miss him a lot. So thank you.
We're now going to hear another 4 videos of some colleagues. Thank you very much, Robin. That was great.
And I think his legacy goes beyond a legacy to palliative care. I think it's a legacy to healthcare in general. And that is his strong promotion and further development of the concepts of whole person care. He was carrying through the legacies of Dame Cicely Saunders in the palliative care realm for sure, but also the legacy of William Osler, who is known to be the father of whole person care and defined that one should treat the person and not the disease, and all of those concepts. And Sir William Osler, I should say, and I should have said Dame Cicely Saunders, but Sir William Osler graduated from McGill Medical School in 1872. And he worked there mostly at the Montreal General Hospital at the time as a professor, as a teacher, and as a clinician. And he left in the late 1880s to be one of the founding professors of Johns Hopkins University. So the legacy of whole person care is really steeped within McGill. But we have to say that during that period and even today, the concepts of whole person care were falling behind and weren't the core value any longer. And Val worked tirelessly to get that message across. And that, so that's what I would say was his major contribution to palliative care and healthcare at large. And I'm happy to see that appears to be flourishing in so many circles now, and many people are picking up that banner, and maybe we'll entrench it solidly again in these difficult times in healthcare. So maybe I conclude by saying that it's just been a privilege of a lifetime to have had Val as a colleague, as a teacher, and most importantly, as a friend.
Hello there. My name is Ayman. I am a current third-year medical student at McGill University, and I'm originally from Malaysia. How I got to meet Dr. Mount, I think, is a very unique experience because I was perhaps the last medical student that he ever interacted with. When I first entered his room, he stuck out his hand. I remember very vividly. He stuck out his hand. The first thing we did, shook hands, and I said, I'm never going to wash this hand ever again. And we basically had a long chat. I was with his wife as well, and we discussed a lot of things regarding the origins of palliative care, how he came up with the name of it. I got some anecdotes from him and from Linda, and that experience to me will be one that will resonate with me for a lifetime. Meeting the founder of palliative care, meeting the founder of anything, it's hard to come by. So that is a very cherished memory for me.
My name is Eduardo Brea. I'm the chair of Palliative Rehabilitation and Integrative Medicine at MD Anderson Cancer Center. And I've been doing palliative care since 1984 when I joined the University of Alberta and the Cross Cancer Institute under the leadership of my mentor and first boss, Dr. Neil MacDonald. During those years in the early 80s, there was pretty well no palliative care. And we started working with a very small group of colleagues in Canada. And of course, the leader of that movement was Dr. Balfour Mount. I had the chance to meet Bal many times throughout the years, and I was able to learn an awful lot about how he, in a very unlikely way, was able to build the first palliative care unit inside a surgical ward at the Ross Pavilion at the Royal Vic. And so if he could do that, we could probably do something similar elsewhere. So we learned that palliative care could be moved into the acute care setting, and could be moved also to settings that were traditionally less welcoming. Throughout the years, I learned so much from Bal. I learned resilience. I learned the importance of standing up to powerful people when you believe that what you're doing is right for the patients and families. And I believe his enormous commitment to compassion. I also managed to destroy his lawnmower in his home at the Laurentians by hitting a rock. And I also have the dubious credit of my dog, Mickey, having peed on Bal Mount's pants when he came to my home for a visit. So I had some memorable encounters beyond these two that led me into feeling less lonely in this journey of taking care of patients and families in environments where the bosses, the biomedical system, is not always understanding. I had the enormous opportunity to go and support Bal when McGill was not making his life easy, and a group of us flew to Montreal to make the case for the enormous contribution he had made. And I am delighted to learn that his memory is being cherished, is being honored by all of you. I think hopefully this will inspire all our new generation to learn about this great Canadian and the great contribution he left. To me, his legacy is palliative care. His legacy is the belief that we can move care earlier in the trajectory of the patient's illness and into all the settings where people are suffering. Thank you very much for listening.
My name is Richard Cruz. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I served as Dean of Medicine, and I had a long association with Dr. Balfour Mount, beginning when he was a young urologist, interested in responsive trauma to the bladder. And I was an orthopedic surgeon interested in trauma and everything else. And my wife, who died 3 years ago, was the medical director at the Royal Victoria Hospital. So between us, we kind of supervised all of Bal's activities. Sylvia supervised the clinical activities, and I was in charge of the academic side of palliative care medicine. So that's where I sort of fit into the Balfour Mount structure. He was a wonderful human being. You know, people who create things like palliative care or early cardiac surgeons. Early cardiac surgeons had all their patients die. Bal was life was not easy for Bal. He subtracted resources from the Royal Victoria Hospital that other disciplines wanted. That wasn't a happy thing for medicine or surgery. And he had to develop a bit of a thick skin. And he did. And he also had to, I'm not sure whether he started out with a backbone, but he sure ended up with one. He was a very tough negotiator. He defended palliative care. He defended his people. He defended music therapists and other disciplines. And of course, he was one of the early truly interprofessional champions. I mean, palliative care, Bal didn't do it all by himself. He did it with a team that he created. Part of his legacy. Things weren't going well at the hospital in terms of resource allocation, so he announced publicly that he was quitting and moving to Kingston. Pretty good tactic. The whole world mobilized to support him. He was never going to move to Kingston, but it worked.
I'm going to read something next from Sharon Carstairs, a Canadian politician and former senator, writes, Balfour Mount was my beacon. Whether writing reports to the Senate of Canada, finding money for the establishment of the Canadian Virtual Hospice, and watching its evolution over the decades, Balfour was always my light. What would he think of this recommendation or this new initiative? Would this activity meet his criteria of making things better for dying Canadians? His beacon will continue to light the path for those working now and in the future. We were so blessed to have him show us the way. And from Joan Foster, a retired palliative care and home nurse, many years ago when I was with Bal and Linda and Bethany at their home, I noticed the following quote on Bal's fridge. I am not who I was. I am not going to be who I was going to be. You changed all that. Who are we going to be? We're going to be who we would never have been without each other. Joseph Bintoro. I have this quote on my fridge, and definitely I'm not the person I would have been without meeting and working beside Bal all the following years as we developed home care, palliative care. Not a day goes by when Bal's wisdom has not been a part of my nursing practice in Montreal. Thank you, Bal. And next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ira Byock to say a few words.
Bal has been one of the most influential people in my life, professionally and personally. I first learned of him. He first became my mentor at a distance when I was a medical student and then a family practice resident in Fresno, California in the late 1970s. I was trying to figure out cradle-to-grave medicine and how well-being could be possible in the far reaches of life. And here was this physician writing from an exotic place, from my perspective of Montreal, who had developed a discipline and a unit and was one of the only physicians writing about how to care well for people through the very end of life. Flash forward into the 1980s and early 1990s, and I, like so many people who've been talking, were impressed with this charismatic speaker who could touch us in our minds and in our hearts in his lectures and presentations, and really influenced the way I thought about clinical care and patients in the world. And I, with Dr. Carla Alexander and Dr. Charlie Sasser, got up the courage to ask Bal to join us on the board of directors of the American Academy of Hospice Physicians, now the American Academy of Hospice and Palliative Medicine, and he did. And Bal went from being a mentor, he still was a mentor, but also coming to me a colleague and gradually a close friend. Fast forward again in the spring of 1996, I flew from Washington, D.C. to Montreal to spend a week with the Bal and the palliative care team on Ross 2. And it was a Saturday morning, and Bal picked me up at the airport. And when he picked me up at the airport, he said, Ira, we have to go get you a tux. Really? It turned out that there was a fundraiser that night at the Ritz and he wanted me to be part of this. So we rented me a tux, and that night I met Sheila Kushner and Kappy Flanders and former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. That next day, Sunday, Val said we should go to a ball game, and it turned out that by the afternoon I was sitting in the cheap seats with Val at the Big O watching the Expos, the first and only game of baseball I ever watched in French. And I couldn't believe it. I kept pinching myself. I was here with my mentor and hero watching a baseball game. Oh my God. The next Monday morning, flash forward again, I was met Bal at the unit on the Royal Vic, and he early on said, "Ira, I'm so sorry that you're here this week, and I have to fly off." I think he was flying off to Texas to give a talk, and he said, "I'm really sorry I won't be here tomorrow on Tuesday, but I'll be back Tuesday night." And he said, "Tomorrow night I have 2 tickets to the Montreal Symphony. It's a big deal. Charles Dutoit and would you like to go?" And he gave me the 2 tickets. And before he took his thumb off the 2 tickets, he said, "And who would you like to go with?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, Bal. I mean, 30 seconds ago, I didn't know I was going." He said, "Yvonne might like to go. Why don't you ask her?" He was speaking about Yvonne Corbet, who was the operational manager of the palliative care service and was also the force behind the International Congress on Care of the Terminally Ill, now the International Congress on Palliative Care. I had related to Yvonne for quite a few years as one would relates to the editor of a prestigious journal with a lot of kowtowing and deep respect. And I was frankly intimidated by Yvonne, so I would never have asked her to come to the symphony with me had it not been for Bal's encouragement and frank direction. Well, I did. We went to that concert together. We became friends, and Yvonne and I just celebrated 28 years of our marriage last 2 weeks ago. So thank you, Bal, for all that you have done for me professionally and personally.
So it turns out we have a great many things to thank Dr. Mount for beyond his contributions to medicine. Thank you, Ira. I'd like to introduce Joanne de Montigny, who was a psychologist who worked with Bal in the palliative care unit from its earliest days. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to listen to all. I met with Dr. Mount in 1986. I was then 36 years old. In order to complete my studies in psychology, I needed to enroll in a clinical internship coordinated by the University of Quebec in Montreal and the Royal Vic Hospital. Implementing the program was not straightforward, but Dr. Mount went above and beyond to validate my approach and future goals. After a year on the unit, I produced an activity report underlying the importance of psychology's role at the bedside of patients, in supporting families, and in listening to healthcare staff. Without Balfour Mount's open heart and mind, without his wonderful assistant, Yvonne Corbet, and without psychiatrist Jacques Voyer, who unfortunately passed away a few years back, I would have never been able to instigate and develop the expertise necessary to train other psychologists wishing to work in the field of grief and dying. I remained there for 29 years, and I have trained over 30 psychologists. Now, let me share shortly a memorable moment. On the first day of my internship, Dr. Mount invited me to accompany him into a room of a person who was at the end of her life. The initiative Dr. Mount took was decisive. He helped me cross the threshold, overcome my fears, and above all, express myself with professional kindness, even if only for the moment of our encounter. Clinical skills would only rise to surface in such a secure space. I will continue to expand his teachings at every opportunity. His death will never diminish the power of his messages, imbued with love and authenticity, which has led the way. Inspiration remains the strength of those who are no longer with us. And let me add one more thing. Let's not forget that behind such a great and fabulous physician and man, someone was all these years standing tall. And I am referring to his beautiful wife, wonderful wife, Linda. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Joanne. I know that Linda is on this call and listening, so I know that she will be deeply touched by that. And I was asked to talk again a little more about my view on the legacy of Balfour Mount. Bell is our father, and that makes sense to me. That agape, as he used to end his letters, that love, that in a sense, his love created us as a discipline, and I think encouraged us to be equally creative. He is our name giver, and increasingly, I think that's, for me, is more and more important. It actually continues to define our task and our destiny. He's a hero in our quest, in our origin story. In his senior years, he increasingly became our philosopher and our muse, inviting us into that deeper healing and whole person care. But I also, in those early years, he was our founder, a title that contains some important nuances. Founder can simply mean the one who establishes something new, but it can refer more narrowly to one who works metals and forges them into usable forms. As I shared at his funeral, the forging of steel has become a powerful metaphor of Bell's life work for me, the steel of palliative care. Bell received gratefully the iron of Dame Cicely and forged it anew in the crucible of 1970s Montreal, incorporating critically important new elements: American thanatology, his own lived experience as a patient, the science and culture of an academic hospital within a universal health system, the humanities, the arts, a diverse range of spiritualities, and finally, generous helpings of Bell's unique and audacious personality. All this he forged into the steel of palliative care. You know, steel is 97% iron, but it is radically different than iron. It is strong, flexible, adaptable, durable. It revolutionized manufacturing from scalpels to skyscrapers. And so too, palliative care is strong, flexible, and adaptable enough to become the template for all future development in the field worldwide. About 2 years ago, I shared this steel metaphor with Bal and with Linda, and they offered a very perceptive addendum. Bal shared that in the process of forging palliative care, he frequently recognized that alchemy was at play. Base metal transforming astonishingly into precious metal. Bal, I think, therefore, was reminding me not to be too concrete, not to lose sight of the surprise, the mystery, the miracle, the delight intrinsic both to palliative care and to life itself. So for me, the steel of palliative care will be forever streaked with the gold of Balfour Mount. And I think we're going just over to Justin. Thank you.
Thanks, John. From a retired social worker, Bram Silver from the Jewish General Hospital. As a former certified oncology social worker, I had the good fortune to have come under the aura of Balfour Mount and to be embraced by his philosophy, namely that one's clinical intervention should always attempt to treat the whole person and not allow for the disease to be the exclusive focal point. Dr. Mount significantly contributed to healing the world of the terminally ill and their families. With the introduction of the concept of palliative care, his focus was unwavering and when it came to diminishing patient suffering, mentally and physically, as much as possible. He was an excellent role model and teacher with an empathetic and compassionate presence for which I, and most certainly many others, shall forever remain grateful. And from Dr. Eduardo Franco, the former chair of McGill's Bronfman Department of Oncology, Dr. Mount's legacy of compassionate care lives on through the caring attitude of so many end-of-life care providers in Montreal and beyond. He taught that medical science and humanism are intertwined in whole person care. As one of his faculty colleagues in the Department of Oncology at McGill, I will always cherish the precious moments I spent with him. My deepest condolences to his family and friends. And now I'd like to introduce Deborah Salmon, a retired music therapist who worked for over 3 decades in palliative care, starting with Bal and his team at the Royal Victoria Hospital.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you to the organizers of this remarkable, beautiful tribute to our beloved Balfour Mount. In 1977, when both palliative care and music therapy were in their infancies in Canada, Bal had the vision to hire a music therapist as part of his multidisciplinary team. Susan Monroe, a fiery pioneer of Canadian music therapy, shared in Bal's passion for treating the whole person and employed music and art to help address the multidimensional. Bal and Susan co-authored the very first article on music therapy and palliative care, which was published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal in 1978. Susan later wrote the first book on the topic and presented widely. I heard her speak in the mid to late 70s and was moved by the depth and intimacy of the work that she described. Little did I know that later in 1984, I would have the privilege of holding her position and would stay there for 35 years. Bal was an avid lover of music, from Bach to Pink Floyd, and understood how music could enhance connection, expression, and healing. Bal often recounted a story of an initial meeting with a patient where he casually asked if she liked music. It turned out they had both attended the same thrilling Elvis concert years earlier, and sharing that joyful memory, he said, created a bond that infused their doctor-patient relationship with a sense of humanity and the illness experience with vitality. Bal valued the triumvirate of clinical work, education, and research, and this also applied to music therapy. He facilitated our hosting of the 3rd International Symposium on Music Therapy and Palliative Care in 2000 at the 13th International Congress. Music therapists gathered from around the world to share their work with one another and with the international palliative care community. The following year, again with Bal's support, the Journal of Palliative Care devoted an entire issue to the fruits of this meeting. At the 2004 International Congress, Bal organized a plenary session, a panel on the healing power of music, which I was honored to participate in, along with Trevor Pinnock and a therapist who worked with musicians. It was really moving. He encouraged my own writing and presentations, was a bit the wind underneath my wings when I was so often very scared to speak. And he allowed for and facilitated the making of a documentary film on my work called On Wings of Song, Music Therapy at the End of Life. This film remains an important teaching tool in music therapy training today. Bal was a champion of music therapy. Thanks to his vision, his unbridled enthusiasm, and his sustained support, music therapy at the end of life is now a recognized palliative care centers now employ music therapists. I am so grateful to Bal, personally, for his mentoring and providing me with multiple opportunities to grow in doing this beautiful work, and with such an amazing team, and professionally for his enormous impact on the development of music therapy in palliative care. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah, so much for that, your contributions and that reflection. I'd like to move on to the next group of video tributes that we have.
When I listened to him, he was living with a tracheostomy.
This guy.
He lived with a tracheostomy for 22 years. And every half a minute or so, he would pause for a noisy deep breath before he could complete the sentence. And during those days when he said that, he said, "Life is wonderful. It just keeps getting better and better." What a lesson. When I worry about small little things, he reminds me, I am failing to look at the positives, at the possibilities. And he reminds me with his words, we are only limited if we choose our limitations. I would add, if we choose our opportunities, it would be just the reverse. As I said, 20 years after the fall of the giant tree, Cicely Saunders, another giant tree has fallen. I quote from Mary Angelo, "When great souls die, after a time period, peace blooms. Our senses whisper to us, they existed. We can be and be better." Thank you, Dr. Balfour Mount.
My name is Anna Towers. For the last 32 years, I've been a palliative and supportive care physician at the McGill University Health Center, where I also run a lymphedema program. And I also do home palliative care for Mount Sinai Hospital. So my most vivid memory of Bal dates to over 50 years ago, back in 1974, when I was a third-year medical student at McGill. And he was a young urology staff person, and he had already started his interest in end-of-life care, Kubler-Ross, etc. And I heard that he was going to give a lecture because I had a vague interest in learning more about end-of-life care, even as a medical student. So I went to one of his lectures, and this is before he started to be accompanied by his amazing trademark shows, video and music, and he was still using slides, and he brought his boombox to play music. But even without his props at the time, this was a very simple lecture. He was enthusiastic and engaging, and I remember two specific things in that talk. He was the only McGill professor that I was exposed to in medical school that used the word spirituality and spiritual care in a lecture. And spirituality has, in the larger sense, has always been very important to me. And it was very affirming to me to be told that I could integrate that into my medical practice. The second thing I remember him saying is that he told us Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was coming to town, and we should all absolutely go and hear her talk. And then he said, and you must come along and bring your girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse. And again, it was the first time in my medical career that a professor acknowledged that we have a private life and that somehow our private life could be integrated into our work somehow, that we should use all of ourselves. I think actually he said girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse. I think he might have also said bring your dog. I'm not sure. I don't recall. This whole thing about integration and using all of ourselves. The other thing he did is he encouraged us to develop artistic pursuits, whether that be in the visual arts, writing, music, which at the time for me was poetry. So I'm sure that I'm not the only person that was inspired by Bal from a very young phase in our careers to embark on palliative care.
I got involved in palliative care in the 90s, 97, I think it was. And it was through a letter that Bal had written to the newspaper that I heard about whole person care and his vision for treating people in medicine as more complete human beings than just a medical condition. I had been a news photographer and I'd lost my career in a serious accident, left with a brain injury and, other injuries. And I was struggling so much in the 90s to get myself involved in something. And palliative care, when I started volunteering, was very meaningful because I saw from my hospital experience that this was a lovely way and a heartfelt way to treat people. I felt like I'd lost, a part of me had died in the accident, and I could somehow relate loss. It somehow touched me, how loss was acknowledged and treated as a part of life. And Bal had, I met Bal at lectures and then talking to him about photography. And he gave me a chance to do photography for palliative care. And that was probably that is the most meaningful thing I've done with my photography experience, in a way that I could no longer to do things as dynamically as I could before. And this was a way to do it at a slower pace and contribute in a way that was so meaningful and heartfelt. I ended up doing photographs on the ward at the Ross Pavilion when it was in the Royal Victoria Hospital, one of the first units, I guess. I think it was the first unit of palliative care. And then at the palliative care congresses, where I met and listened to so many inspiring people.
And then also working on the International Congress every 2 years, as you know, being part of the program. It's not every 2 years. It's a constant drum roll in the back of the program. You start, like 2 months before the current program is going to happen. And so that was constantly a drum roll, and it was very exciting to be part of that creative life with Balfour Mount. I was certainly a spectator, and I hope I had a hand in helping him along, but the creativity was all his. But I remember this one meeting, he insisted, it was a planned meeting, it was going to be in our boardroom, etc., at the hospital, and he said this particular meeting had to take place at his home, and so he invited me to his home on a weekday, and he said he had to have this meeting downstairs in his downstairs den. So I arrived and we went downstairs, and he sat me in the middle of the sofa, and he put these headphones on me, and then he blasted out Pink Floyd's The Wall. and I jumped out of my seat. I have to say, Balfour Mount has contributed to a number of gaps in my general education, and I would say that rock music was one of those gaps. And I have come to totally love Pink Floyd and The Wall and rock music in general. But this particular meeting was about choosing which piece of music we would use at the theme for this particular year. And I'm sorry, I should have looked it up, but I've forgotten. And actually, Pink Floyd and The Wall came on top for the closing session. And as you can imagine, it was a great hit. And for me, it's a lasting memory. And I am so grateful to him for everything he's introduced me to.
Val is such an extraordinary person to be able to see how he took his understanding of medicine, his understanding of the needs and demands of patients with serious illness, his advocacy for them, and then move that into the arena of the congresses. And each congress had a different theme. Each congress was introduced by extraordinary music. Each congress gave credence to the importance of art therapy or music therapy or psychosocial distress. So he had this extraordinary ability to bring together all of that together into the world of palliative care. And be assured, this was at a time when the rest of medicine clearly was not hearing this or knowing this or understanding it. And it was quite innovative. And so he's our palliative care disruptor. He's our palliative care innovator. And he deserves such incredible credit and, in fact, awe for how he, in his own personhood, was able to do this.
So, many of you will have recognized Kathleen Foley. Ruth Woolridge wrote, "In 1994, I received a letter out of the blue from Dr. Mount thanking me for a film that we had made about palliative care in Nairobi, Life into Their Days. The letter said the film had been awarded a 5-star rating and would open the 10th International Congress with 1,100 delegates. He added that they were indebted to Nairobi Hospice for the film and the lessons the film provided. Dr. Mount signed the letter, 'We are humbled and stand in your debt. Personal good wishes, Balfour Mount.' Such encouragement enabled palliative care to flourish in Kenya, where now there are over 100 units in hospitals, health centers, and home-based care services. Thank you, Dr. Mount." Yoram Singer from Israel wrote, "I had initiated the first home hospice program in Israel in 1993, realizing that I had no one to learn from and that in order to develop and expand this discipline, I would need to increase my knowledge and expertise in the field. I applied to do a palliative care fellowship at McGill. In 1995, Dr. Mount accepted me. To this day, I have no idea why. It was under his mentorship that I learned and gained the confidence and experience, not only of the science, but more importantly, the art of palliative care. He was the one who prodded me not to be afraid of feeling for the patient and the family, of feeling with the patient and family, of listening, even the most intimate, the saddest, the deepest feelings and concerns. He gave me the courage and the confidence of diving into the world of spirituality and existential suffering. This message, this discovery I carried with me back to Israel. I shared this message with my colleagues, and to this day, it is this message that we carry in our successful endeavors to expand and develop palliative care in Israel. I stayed in contact with Bal throughout the past 30 years, updated him on our work, and received his blessings. On my behalf and on behalf of the palliative care community in Israel, thank you, Bal. Thank you so very much." Perhaps I'll just continue, John.
Okay.
With there was a final reflection before passing over to John from Dr. Michael Carney. Bal regarded patients as his teachers. Prominent among them was a young man named Chip. He writes, "I feel Chip's presence. I often do, even though it's been decades since we last spoke, just days before his death. You know, Bal, this last year has been the best of my life. Those last months had been agonizing for those of us who cared for Chip. We had been helpless as the apparent triumph of surgery and chemotherapy melted before our eyes. The physical magnificence of this gracious, world-class athlete and businessman had been reduced to a grotesque parody of his former impressive presence. The best year of that life? Chip explained that he had found himself on an unexpected journey inward. It was that voyage, he said, that had filled his dying with wonder and peace. He was 30 years old. And again, Chip was to be a linchpin anchoring my two careers, surgery and palliative care, a symbol of ultimate victory in the face of defeat, evidence of the promising potential of the inner journey when turned to it with singular focus. It seems to me that this vignette highlights two of Bal's primary concerns, how healing in the most profound sense can happen regardless of circumstances, and the importance of the inner journey and relationships in this process. Bal was a hero as a physician, author, teacher, and pioneer. He was also a wounded healer who understood that fellow feeling, warmth, vulnerability, and presence are the most potent medicines we can share with our patients.
I think we'll end with reading actually words of Bal, that Bal and Linda sent a card to Brahms Silver in 2012, a Christmas card, Brahms being a social worker, Jewish general. Joy to the world. Warm holiday greetings to family and friends. May the year ahead bring you health and joy. We are so grateful to have you in our lives. The year just passed has brought us moments of community and celebration, awe and loss, moments when time seems to stand still. May we treasure each day that lies ahead. May we learn to be more generous in our caring for each other and mindful in our stewardship of this precious planet. May the music inspire us, the books enlighten us, the ironies of life delight us, our creativity grow, our inner peace deepen, our attitude of gratitude expand. Warmest thoughts to you and yours. We send you our love, Linda, Bethany, and Bal.
Greetings, Linda, friends and colleagues of Balfour Mount. My path towards palliative care started, I think, in 1978 when I attended a lecture at the Royal College given by Bal. I was then director of the Cross Cancer Institute at the University of Alberta, and he got me thinking about, well, palliative care should surely be introduced into cancer centers where patients and families may be able to have suffering relieved earlier in their course of illness. I contacted Bal, and he kindly arranged for me to visit and work with him in Montreal during a sabbatical year. And earlier, during the course of that sabbatical, he helped me set up some meetings in some English hospices and to spend a month working with Kathy Foley in her extraordinary cancer pain program at Memorial Sloan Kettering Institute. Upon returning to the Cross Cancer Institute, I did set up a palliative care program, which eventually evolved into a citywide program, thanks in good part to Eduardo Barrera, who had joined me a few years after I first returned from that sabbatical. I think this story is probably one that resonates with others who are taking part in this celebration of life because it reflects Bal's profound influence on so many of us. Certainly, he was the most major figure in my life influencing my career. At this point, I think I'd like to add a few personal comments gleaned over some time spent with Bal over the subsequent years. First off, he was a very joyous man. Linda and Bal, deeply passionate and interested across the whole spectrum of cultural activities. They were knowledgeable and enjoyed participation in art, theater, cinema, concerts, music of all sorts. Notably, he was a very fine photographer. he was perhaps the most enthusiastic man I ever met. And I fondly remember having meetings with him in which he would come into perhaps my cubicle and say, Neil, you've got to drop everything tonight and you've got to see da 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 da, the best movie I have ever seen. Couple of weeks, that line might be repeated, but with concern to theater or to an art show, or rounding back to perhaps another cinema, which was the best film ever made. He even had me going to a horse show. I think it was called Cavalia, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think it's of some interest that Bal's deep, passionate connections in culture, I think, informed his overall work. He had a great sense, very optimistic man, a great sense of human potential and the very best that humanity could offer, as reflected in culture, as reflected in kindness and compassion, as reflected throughout the best part of humanity. And as such, I think that his work, his magisterial work, was in many ways helped along by his personal commitments and his enjoyments. Bal was clearly a man for the ages. He was clearly a man for all seasons. I was fortunate to work with him over some years, and I'm deeply honored to be able to say a few words at his celebration of life. Thank you, Linda, and all good fortune to all the rest of you. Bye-bye.
I had the privilege of Bal being both a colleague and a friend. Bal had a great passion for life, which manifests itself in his work, interests, and relationships. He was an excellent speaker who both inspired and challenged us as he emphasized the importance of holistic care and the value of each individual. Bal helped identify and establish the structures necessary to deliver this whole person care. Interdisciplinary teams, acute and home care, in acute and home care settings, specialized knowledge and discipline recognition, and care that is based on solid scientific research. On a more personal note, he welcomed me into the Delta group, members of whom were Doctors Neil MacDonald, John Scott, Ina Cummings, and Eduardo Bruera, where we discussed and strategized, among other things, the development of a palliative care specialty in the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. He opened opportunities for me for international travel and presentations. We spent one weekend developing some reflections for one of the international palliative care conferences, using my photos from travel to the Galapagos and India. It was great fun. Another highlight was when Bal and Linda were celebrating his honorary degree from Queen's University, and we were able to share that with them. Bal and I shared not just our birth dates, but also a deep love and connection to dogs. I cherish the many meals and times that Bal, Linda, Bethany, our dogs, and I spent together. I think Bal's greatest gift was his warmth, complete engagement, and support of the person in front of him. This connection helped his patients find meaning and purpose in their lives, and challenged many of us to pursue and sustain efforts to improve the care of people with advanced disease. Thank you, Bal, for giving us so much.
Hello, my name is Jo Hockley, and I feel honoured to be able to give this tribute to the life and work of Professor Balfour Mount. I'd like to indulge in a memory the year I first met him. back in 1980 when I was working as a ward sister at St Christopher's Hospice, London. Balfour Mount and John Scott had been invited by Dame Cicely Saunders to the Coming of Age conference in memory of St Christopher's founding patient, David Tasma, a Jewish refugee from Poland. By then, St Christopher's had been working to promote hospice care for 13 years, but it was Balfour Mount who was integral to the word palliative care being adopted here in the UK alongside hospice. For me, at this stage, I'd only been working in palliative care a couple of years. I'd previously worked as a midwife. But it was following this conference at St Christopher's that Dame Cicely arranged for Wendy Burford, a nurse from the Brompton Hospital in London, and myself to attend the 3rd International Conference of Hospice Care in Montreal a few months later that year in October. After the conference, we had the opportunity to visit the palliative care unit at the Royal Victoria Hospital and hear about the consultation team reaching out into the hospital. In the afternoon, we sat with Balfour Mount and chatted over a cup of coffee, discussing the importance of hospital-based palliative care teams, the spirituality of caring, and music therapy. He was so personable and had an incredible way of making one feel totally at ease. Following our visit to Montreal, Dame Cicely had arranged for us to visit other hospital-based palliative care teams, firstly in Toronto with Dr. John Scott, and then to St Boniface's Hospital in Winnipeg. Little did I realise the impact all these visits would have on my career. A couple of years later, as a direct result of my visit to Canada, I was inspired to write to all the teaching hospitals in London, other than St Thomas's Hospital, who was already starting such a team, regarding the importance of palliative care within the hospital setting. Only St Bartholomew's Hospital, where I had trained, gave a positive response, and I secured a year's funding to prove the importance of hospital-based palliative care team. 6 years later, with a full multidisciplinary team behind me, we learnt that our newly established team at Barts had reduced complaints in relation to end-of-life care from 8% of all complaints down to 2%. I then went to set up another hospital-based palliative care team at the Western General Hospital in Edinburgh, Scotland, and then I moved into care homes. I have so much to be thankful for in meeting Balfour Mount because he helped me see the importance of spreading the word of palliative care. Well, to end, like Dame Cicely, Balfour Mount's Christian faith was integral to all he was and all he did, and in particular the importance of what underpins good palliative care, namely that it neither hastens nor postpones death. Thank you for this opportunity to share.
We just are coming to the end of this really extraordinary collection of memories and stories. And I know I speak for all of us at Palliative Care McGill in thanking you all for being part of this extraordinary legacy and helping us celebrate with him. It was really important for us to have this opportunity to do this together, those of us who knew and benefited from all that Val contributed. And we will have an opportunity again at next year's 50th anniversary of the Congress that he started in Montreal in October. And I hope to see many of you there, where we will take another opportunity to celebrate him and all that he contributed.
Yes, thank you very much. And right following our closing, there's going to be a photo montage that if you have a few more moments to watch, you'll find it very good. So thank you for joining us on this.
that you have the most beautiful face? Do you realize we're floating in space? Do you realize that happiness makes you cry? Do you realize that everyone you know someday will die? And instead of saying all of your goodbyes, let them know you realize that life goes fast. It's hard to make the good things last. You realize the sun don't go down. It's just an illusion caused by the world spinning around. Do you realize that everyone you know someday will die? And instead of saying all of your goodbyes, let them know you realize that life goes fast. It's hard to make the good things last. You realize the sun don't go down. It's just an illusion caused by the world spinning around. Do you realize that you have the